Hola.
Hi.
I
Try
can.
the scarf on now.
We cannot see you.
Oh, that old thing again. Okay.
Yeah.
Voila. There it is.
Okay. So thanks for doing this. And I must say, before we start, that we're so honored that you're here, but also that you bought a computer. So
Well, I was trying to buy one.
yeah. But that's amazing. So I had to mention it. So let's start with our short conversation. You know that this session is the departure point of this session is your text, the way to Plunderphonia. But we are reading this text also because we are interested in the aspects in this text that deal with time and new approximations in time and music. So we would like to start with your own artistic practice. How relevant is a non-conventional approach to time in your own artistic practice?
So I think what musicians do, performing musicians do, is they occupy time. When you go to see them, I'm talking about concert situation, it's slightly different with recorded information. But essentially, you're sharing time with a bunch of other people. And mostly they're being fairly receptive and you're occupying their time. So you have to try to make that experience interesting. I think pretty much all musicians do that. The difference in the consciousness of real time between different kinds of musicians would be those who are performing composed music are only half in real time. The other half of their mind and what's controlling their bodies is actually in the past. It's a dead thing. So they're trying to negotiate with one foot in the land of the dead and one foot in the land of the living. And so for them, time is divided and complicated. For an improviser, for instance, time is very uncomplicated because the only time you have is the time you're in. And everybody in the room is in the same position. They're all sharing exactly the same time. So your consciousness of time is somehow negotiated, but it's real. It's not part of the cyborg culture that we're all now, more and more sliding into as machines take over our lives. So in that sense, I think the consciousness of time is a part of, it's an important part of performance practice.
And yet, in some improvisational music, you can find certain cliches or certain things that are also related to written memory or biological memory. I mean, it's not fair to say that improvisational music is so based in real time because it actually contains certain bricks of things that have already happened, and there's I don't know if you can expand a bit on that idea.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right, of course, because although you're operating in real time, by which I mean you can't go back and change anything. If you make a mistake, you've made a mistake. I mean, if you're writing music, you make a mistake, or you look back later and you don't like it, you can just change it. In real time, you can't change it. So, in this aspect, time is real. But of course, in the aspect of most of the things that you do are routines of some sort. They're things that your body has learned, things that you've done before, things that you know will work, things that are floating around in your brain that somebody else did that you're going to do now, pretend that you just thought of it, and so on. So, in terms of really existing in real time, that is to say, without any recollection happening, without things being brought into the present from the past, then probably only certain kinds of meditative music and really great improvisation fit that bill. I mean, when an improvisation is really running perfect, your brain does switch off completely. But afterwards, you can't remember what you did. So there may still be routines, there certainly probably are, but they are actually somatic, they're body routines, really. They're not routines that you're conscious of, so you're not conscious of compiling the present from the past.
Okay, so in your text, you also define a memory system. You say that a memory system is defined by everything it remembers. And you also mentioned that a recording can be seen as a synthesis of biological memory and written memory. And I was wondering if you could expand a bit those ideas.
Well, yeah, in my, memory is simply the ability to recall and repeat something. So what we normally mean when we say memory is that this thing in our head. And of course, this thing in our heads, if you like, soft, sort of wetware, as they say, is actually something we can't control. Memories come to us. We try to recall things, but when we do recall them, we don't actually know if they're accurate or not, because memory is notorious for rewriting itself. Every time you open a memory, it's a bit like opening a document, and you make changes to the document. And when you close it, as far as your memory is concerned, this is now the real memory. So when people tell you about things you did when you were a child, which you don't remember, suddenly you remember them as if they were your own memories. So this kind of memory is a very organic and productive kind of memory, because you're always forgetting things. You don't have to repeat things exactly. You can change according, so music will evolve through this kind of memory according precisely to real situations. It's always part of the present in that respect. Written memory, which is equally a memory and does the same job, is an objective kind of memory in which things are not forgotten. Once they're stuck down on the paper, they stay the way they are. So this has already pulled us away from the experience of real time. Because now part of us is being, as I said in the beginning, with the musicians playing the score, they're stuck in a past time, and the more past that time gets, the more mysterious it becomes. And the third kind of memory which is sound recording, doesn't remember instructions like writing. It also doesn't forget anything. It remembers real sound, and it will repeat the same sound forever and ever if you let it. So this is increasing the quantity of dead things in the world and the weight of dead things that is pressing down on us poor living things. We have to work harder and harder to be heard underneath this great cacophony of existing dead stuff that's floating around from the past and won't go away. We need a big raise button.
But again, I think everyone bears a personal luggage, you bring your own stuff. And when I listen to stuff I used to listen as a teenager, when I listen to that stuff now, even it's recorded and it's meant to be dead, I still discover new things. So you cannot consider, maybe it's too bold to consider a sound recording as something completely closed, because still you have to bring that interpretation, that new listening experience, even though it is something that you have heard repeatedly.
Yes, no, you're right. I overstate. I mean, of course, this has been the case in literature and painting and sculpture forever. There's sculptures that were made for 5,000 years ago in Babylon. We dig them out the ground, and there they are. They're still there, and actually that's a good thing. We're happy to have all this evidence of the past. But there's an amount of measure, too much may not be such a good thing. Too much. It's like if you put a preservation order on all buildings, then the architecture, the environment will never change with everything. They need a certain amount of forgetting to offset the usefulness of the remembering that you've got. But what you say about even the same thing being different, recording is the same thing, and you experience it in a different way because of the what you know, what you've learned since last time you heard it, how you think this is true. And this is quite interesting the way there's this negotiation in the musical record between you're coming to it again, having forgotten. This memory has forgotten a lot of it, and it's coming to it again with not too many preconceptions, except the fact that it knows that it likes it. But on the other hand, the recording is playing you because you probably remember with a lot of, it's certainly with important recordings, you remember where you were when you first heard it, what you were doing. If I listened to Strawberry Fields Forever Now, the recording would play me. It would make me remember all the things that I was doing in 1967 when I first bought that record and came home and put it on the turntable. How I felt, when I was, I don't know, 20 or whatever. So this is a quite strange thing about dead media, that they somehow are able to invoke a response in you which living media can't, because they are of the past and they drag you back into the past, which of course the things in the present can't do. It's just a question of how much time we want to spend in the past.
Okay, so let me check where I am. Some of the works and theories we've dealt with so far in these sessions were bold enough to claim both theoretical models as well as practices that suggested the idea of music outside time. That was the case of the Goody Pal and some of Lamont Young's Eternal Words, or even Ligeti's Continuum. Is it a play on words, or do you actually think that music can be out of time? In fact, in your text, you say that notation is somehow out of time. You do say that notation is about music, but it's never music.
Well, notation is never music, but when notation is turned into music by people playing, there is a conflict between if you're playing if you're improvising in real time, then the exact state of your body, the exact state of the acoustic conditions in the room, the feedback that you're getting from the public, everything is non-contradictory. It's just real. As soon as you're, for instance, in a very bad acoustic space, trying to play a piece of quite complicated, fast music, it'll just sound like a blur. It's a contradiction. It can't work because you're trying to impose a past on a present which won't accept it. So you always you have that problem. But I think there are two senses here of being out of time. The other sense is a sense that you would apply to Lamont Young, for instance. Lamont Young is out of time because of the tedium, because of the repetition. There are two kinds of silence. I mean, there are other kinds of silence, but there are two kinds of silence which are not thought about as being silent. In other words, where nothing is happening, apparently. And loops is one of them, and drones is another. So if you're playing a drone, and you play it for a very long time, then your mind has nothing to hold on to except the tiny inner movements of the sound, which I presume is the point. But this takes you inside yourself, and you lose all sense of time. If you sit and listen to the same noise for an hour, you really can't say if it's an hour or 2 hours or 10 minutes or what. So in this sense, you really can affect. And in the same way that if you listen to one of John Zorn's very fast cutting pieces, and it's only 50 seconds long, there's so much information in it that you often think it was much longer than it was. So the subjective quality of time is really changed by different kinds of music. Things which repeat a lot collapse in the end. If they go on long enough, they collapse time down. So in this sense, they really are out of time, in the sense that they're not occupying real time because real time is suppressed by them.
Okay. Also, when we were discussing the idea of your contribution to this reading, group, you suggested that the assistant should listen to this hits health and efficiency. I was. Why did you want to recommend this piece within this context?
I think it was because what's interesting, what I find interesting about health and efficiency is it's the other side of the repetition coin. I mean, it is interesting when you listen to it, just to see how long you think, in case anybody didn't listen to it, it's a short-ish piece of written song, followed by a very long repeated riff, which is constantly driving forward. And if you think, how long, what's the ratio of the written bit to the other bit, you'll almost certainly be wrong. Because the repeating thing, you lose track of how long it is, because it just goes on and on. And it's not like a loop. I mean, the other thing about this piece, which I thought would be interesting, is to compare it with a loop. I mean, they are playing exactly the same thing, again and again and again, but they are playing. It's not a loop. So you hear all the tiny differences, and you feel the forward motion. I mean, this is the thing about time, isn't it? This is the thing about time. Time is forward motion. This is how we experience it. You can't go back. Things are always moving forward. Loops go back. They really go back. I mean, somehow your brain is able to hear that this is not a repetition. This is actually the same thing again. So if you get stuck in the loop, being dead is, in fact, what is it? Not Avalon, but there's a movie, which I can't remember the name of, where the symbolic, the metaphor for somebody having just been killed in the room is the needle going round and round and round and round in the middle of a record. That's death, because it's just a loop. It's trapped. Forward motion of time is stopped. So anything that stops forward motion of time has a special effect on us, I think. That in some deep way. Don't ask me how, but you feel it. I feel it. I mean, I get really agitated if I hear a loop for a long time. I can't listen to it. It drives me crazy. Whereas repetition, I don't have a problem with if it's properly driven. And the thing about health and efficiency is you can hear the band constantly moving forward, even though nothing's happening. It's not going anywhere, but it's definitely moving forward. That's why.
Okay. And any other considerations we should bring to the table regarding the issues we're dealing with in this session? New approximations of time and memory in music.
No, I don't think I don't know. No, I can answer questions, but I don't have any general observations. I don't think.
Okay, so I think we could be talking for hours and hours, but the purpose of this thing is that they talk. So I think we will say goodbye, and thanks a lot for your contribution.
It was a pleasure.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
I'll show you the audience.
Okay.
Oh, hi audience. Howdy.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.